You're listening to Akomplish Radio from Akomplish.com. It's a safe space with cuddle pets and hipster haircuts. Okay, not really. From productivity to business strategy and market insights, there's something for every business leader and entrepreneur. Hipster haircut or not. Sorry, no cuddle pets though. We do have to draw the line somewhere. Welcome to the show.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to yet another great, fantastic, wonderful episode of Akomplish Radio. Yes, that's right. The show that is not radio, but we call it that. All right, my friends. Well, today I wanted to get into a topic that has been very powerful for me. And just a moment here. And that topic is, it's a concept that we utilize a lot in coaching work that we're doing right now. And we call it the perfect week. Now, I've used other terms for it. And it's not something that, of course, we invented out of thin air by any stretch. In fact, I definitely subscribe to the thinking of, I believe was it Picasso? I don't know, I'm going to butcher that. But basically, this idea that all great art is essentially derivative forgery of something else. And so it's an amalgamation of ideas and concepts that we're constantly developing. And the perfect week is definitely one of those. And of course, the idea of planning out a perfect week is far from original. But let's talk about how this particular concept is, in many cases, saving my bacon amongst others that are doing lots of crazy, interesting, and even far more interesting things than me. The perfect week is really about being very intentional with how your week plays out and avoiding the reactionary, it happens to you automatically, type situation that we tend to find ourselves in. Basically, we wake up, we go to work, and we wait to see what hits us in the face as we walk in, and any projects that we're doing. This really came about to help clean up and deal with the overwhelm that so many business owners are fighting and dealing with, and especially if you have more than one project going on. So some of us are crazy enough to be doing too many things, and we don't even have to go down the road of how that's a bad idea, but we do it anyway. I am far from innocent in this case. In fact, I am probably a poster child for how bad this is. But basically putting our hands in too many pots and getting stretched too thin across too many projects. And we won't even necessarily get into I'm definitely far from justifying continuing to do that. I think many of us could do for some thinning out of the work we're doing, and if not, at least delaying lots of things, right? So I often say that you don't have to say no, just say not right now, and that's good enough. And so that's the easy out, but it gets you the same effect, and you can kind of press forward without feeling like you're giving up on something. But regardless, we still often will find ourselves dealing with a couple of projects, right? We're dealing with more than one, and they're often diverse enough that it's hard to stay focused because the topic and everything that's going on in the business itself might be completely different. You might be leading more than one business. So it's not far from an easy concept, and far, this idea and feeling of overwhelm from business owners is huge. We're all, it's easy enough with one project. You get a couple of them in there, and you're screwed. So let's talk about what the perfect week is all about. So, okay, it is essentially just that. It's mapping out what a great week can and should look like. What how would it go in your ideal world, given everything that you have to go on and what you want to get done? What would the most awesome week you can come up with? How would that go? And lay it out. Lay it out like a template, like it's the generic week. Obviously individually you might be traveling a little bit here and there, and depending on your travel schedule, that'll be programmed in. I mean, you might just say I travel on Monday through Wednesday or whatever it is. But basically that is the idea. Is let's define a template week that we can utilize as our reference standard, and then that we can plan against. We can plan having that in mind. And take advantage of really getting this perfect week, played out. And then we start to live by intention. We talk about that a lot, especially at New Work Revolution, in the coaching work we're doing there, is designing business by intention and not by default, as we often say. So it's not by just letting it happen to us, but actually being a little bit more intentional about it. And that's what the perfect week is about, is actually designing your time, how you spend your time, designing it with some intention. So, a couple of things. First of all, right now, I think this is extremely valuable because there are so many companies that the routine has been upended, and entrepreneurs and business owners and otherwise, managers, leaders around the world, your routine has been upended, and it's been shifted and changed in some way, whether you can't even go into work right now and you're completely closed or some variation thereof. Business is different, focuses are different, and it's just like a scattered mess. And so finding a new routine or allowing your routine to adapt to new realities is a big part of the perfect week. And so this becomes a very powerful exercise to do right now with the new circumstances. But part of it is to do this on a semi-regular basis, and I'll talk about when to do that. But basically, reviewing your design on a regular basis allows you to adapt it to new circumstances and new opportunities and new whatever it is. And so that's definitely a big piece of this. The other piece is giving yourself permission to to not keep it all in your head. I mean, we tend to get overwhelmed because there's so much going on in our head and we can't get it out. And one of the reasons we can't get it out is because there's an internal fear of forgetting it or not getting done if we let it go or whatever it is. And so we need a model to be able to help us with that. And then the real goal, and that's really accomplished with the assistance of a couple other tools and concepts, but regardless, the other goal then is within the perfect week to be able to be present to whatever is on the plan, and not be looking at this mondo list that just continues to grow or worrying about all the other things that are happening. It's so interesting how we tend to sit in one meeting worrying about the next, and then when you get to that one, you just worry about the next one, and you literally are never present to what is going on right now, and the conversation at hand. It's very hard to be. There are some industries that honestly, this is a blessing in how they work, that you're kind of forced to be a little bit more present. And you still can, of course, be absent-minded. But there are some industries where you're doing a lot more one-on-one work directly with a person, face-to-face even, stuff like this, where you're kind of forced into some level of focus, right? Now, you still can be distracted by lots of things, but it does kind of force it upon you a little bit more than it would if you're not like a one-on-one, operator. So we work a lot with medical professionals, and that's the case, so they it's a little bit easier for them to be present with a patient because they're sitting down with a patient, and in that room, and the environment is such and it's scheduled such that they just go in, shut things off, get the work done, and then they leave. And that's fantastic. In fact, that is the exercise that we want to implore across our entire schedule, is that we have windows and blocks of time where we focus on specific things, even finding the deep work. If you read that book, it's a great book, or Flow, similar concepts there. Finding that deep work or that flow where we can really get some powerful things done, be focused and be present, and just work through some the things that are on that list. So that's a big piece of this, is giving ourselves permission, mental permission, to let some things go and to focus in the areas that are more important, and in the present moment as it is. So those are a couple of the big benefits or things we're going after. The other piece is this is about habit. It's a system concept. It isn't about goals and targets and achievement. And what we found is that I would rather have habits over goals. And the reason for that is because habits just happen. I mean, it's like it progress happens, and it's also a win just by getting it done half the time. So if you go to the gym every day, even if you had a day where you didn't lift as much, but you went, you often still feel like it was a win because you went to the gym. Now, obviously, I'm not saying there are no place for goals. I mean, if you're a competitive weightlifter, you definitely have goals and targets and other things going on. But so much of just that health and the goal there is just going through the motions, actually getting the job done. And this isn't about foregoing those things across your business or life by any stretch, but a habit is so much. It's easier to fall back on when things kind of get foggy. Goals can be debilitating. In fact, if they're stretch goals, sometimes they're overwhelming in and of themselves, let alone everything that comes with them. And so we tend to get overwhelmed by certain goals if we're trying to stretch out there. So we might have those goals, but having habits to fall back on allows us to still make progress and not be paralyzed without focusing on the goals themselves and all the overwhelm. And so it allows us to kind of forget those things for the moment. Let me just go through the motions. But the motions we've set in place are ones that will move the needle. They are ones that are going to progress towards those goals and towards our bigger aspirations or whatever it might be. And chipping away at all we have to do. It's eating the elephant. I'm going to use more euphemisms and phrases than I can come up with here. But it's one bite at a time, right? So we can just step back and just take that next bite. We don't have to worry about the whole elephant. Just take that next bite. That is what habits are about and why they become so powerful. And that's what, and that is definitely what the perfect week is based on. It's based on developing habit more than it is about aspirational goals and things of that nature. So a great quote. Octavia Butler said this quote: "First, forget inspiration. Habit is more dependable. Habit will sustain you whether you're inspired or not. Habit is persistence in practice." And that's really what it's about. Habits are something as well, like a goal. Once you achieve it, then you're left with a vacuum. You're empty, and you got to fill it with something else. And so often the first knee-jerk reaction is just a further goal. So like, oh, I achieved this level of sales. Well, now I want to achieve another greater level of sales. I lifted this much weight. Well, now I want to lift even more weight. Whatever it might be, and you just continue to stretch out that way. Or you got to fill it with something else, some other goal to kind of focus on. But it's very easy to let, if you do that, the risk, of course, is that those things fall back. So we focused on sales, nailed it, boom. Now we're going to focus on this customer delivery thing or whatever. And all of a sudden sales slip and you fall away from your goal. But if you had the habit in place, man, you're still going to do it. You're going through those motions and you're going to make it happen. So that's why they're just so much more powerful. And often you will often supersede your goals even without trying because of that. Basically looking at it and saying, once you've achieved the goal, you just keep going with it because you've got the habit. You might have got it a little bit earlier than you anticipated. You're in those motions. They're compounding effects, like it's momentum that's building. So every day that you do it, it's just more and more powerful. You get better at it, whatever it is. And before you know it, you're actually achieving greater things than your goals had in mind. And that's really powerful. And you don't get let down by them, like I said. So if the goal is a stretch and you don't quite hit it or whatever, circumstances change, it's not demoralizing because you just can go through those motions and get it done. That's why I like habits more than goals. I do think there is space and place for both, and both should definitely be there. But there are times and places when you should think about them, and it's often separate. Like there are definitely times where just don't worry about the goals. Just focus on getting the work done and doing some great things, and focus on some other variables, and you still make the progress you want. So that's the other big part of this. This is putting in place a system that allows you to instill habit as opposed to worrying about goal and still get the progress that you're looking for. All right. So let's get into how to actually build your perfect week. Really, you start with just list out everything you've got to do normally. Like if you just sat down and went through, this is my laundry list, massive laundry list, brainstorm, look at your calendar right now and what you got done last week, your emails, whatever. And let's just come up with the list. Like, what is it that I do every week? If I have this list, I can then start placing that list on my calendar and start to see what fits and what doesn't. And there's a whole nother activity that we'll get into. We call it the activity inventory to kind of dig into that a little bit more because there's a lot of that stuff that needs to be cleaned up, right? You shouldn't be doing it all. Variables that we want to look at to really clean up this activity inventory. But regardless, without even doing that, just getting a big fat cursory list down of all the major stuff you've got to do in a given week, and even throwing in some interruptions, or at least the idea that I get interrupted, frequently about these types of things or whatever it is. Just throwing it all in there. Fires that I have to put out, especially if you start to notice patterns, like I tend to put out similar types of fires on a regular basis, we can actually place that right in our perfect week. And I'll get into that as well as far as like the what do you want to call it? The anti-perfect week people, those that think, oh, this won't work for me. We'll talk about that a little bit, and at least the excuses that we typically hear. But once you've got this list, we want to start with what's most important to you. So we want to match your perfect week to your value system. So what do you consider the most important things to you? Many people tend to say stuff like my health and family and God and whatever it is. Like those types of things tend to be at the top of our big priority list. But our calendar never reflects that. In fact, rarely does it reflect that at all. It tends to be work first, of course, and then when we can fit in all this other stuff, but we still pretend to prioritize those other things. And again, another quote that I'm going to butcher and don't remember who said it, but basically, you can tell a person's priorities by looking at their calendar. Where is it that they're working to spend time and what they're doing? And that's a big part of this. So we want to start with what's most important to you. So you take this massive list, and I'm obviously going to simplify this way down. We definitely dive into this more, on over at Akomplish.com as well as New York Revolution. But regardless, let's take this list and let's decide what's most important to us. So maybe health and family are really important to us. Okay, great. So look at your calendar. We're going to open up a blank slate calendar and just start placing things on this calendar. So I want date night once a week with my spouse. Awesome. So put that on there. Pick a night, and that's going to be date night. I want kid time. I want kid alone time or something. It's dad fun time once a week, one evening a week. Okay, great. Put that on there. Exercise is important to me. Health is good. Okay, so let's throw that in there. I want to start the day right. So I want to do a little meditation, a little reading, all this kind of thing. So let's put that in there. Let's put this on your calendar. Boom. It's carved out. And this is, again, just your template week. We've just got this wide open template week, which I recommend just even setting up a new calendar on Google Calendar. If you use something like Google Calendar, you can just set a new one up and start to model out your week on it. Then you can move stuff around, and it gets kind of nice and fun. And there's other advantages to that when we get into planning your actual week. But regardless, map this thing out. Let's put those high priority things on there first. Boom, boom, boom. They're on this. The perfect week is starting to come around, right? So, but now we've got all the work stuff that I haven't even put in yet. So now I'm looking at this week, and I can see what windows in time I really have. And I got to start making some sacrifices and adjustments. Some of this will come on the personal side. Maybe I said I was going to read for 2 hours a day, and that's probably unrealistic. I could do an hour, though, so I'm going to cut that back a little bit. But we're recognizing that we're giving up on certain priorities when we do these things, okay? So there is value to this exercise and starting it this way, even if things kind of get shifted around a little bit. But then we need to start just putting those work things in. If you have meetings that recur on a regular basis, of course, get those in first, because you can't schedule stuff over that. Let's put those things into your ideal week. I do a sales meeting every Monday from 11 to noon. Okay, great. Let's throw that in there. Whatever other meetings kind of recur, especially, let's get those in there and see where our time is spent now. And we're continuing to develop this ideal week and fit in those tasks and efforts. There are certain habits that I always recommend. I mean, there are things we get really distracted by that we can start to batch together on the ideal week. Checking email is a great one. So a couple of recommendations there, like don't check email before noon because it tends to derail everything else for the rest of the day. Whatever fires are lit in your email are going to then dictate what you think about for the rest of the day. So let's wait to check email till maybe noon, so half the people don't expect responses before then anyway. Life goes on, yada, yada. So maybe after lunch, I've got an email check time, and I'm actually going to check it at that point. And I just schedule 30 minutes there to check email and respond and stuff. And if it's a big, long, detailed response, I'll say, yeah, let me get back to you. And then I put it on my, task list or whatever to research or figure out. So I'm just going to deal with email, after lunch and maybe right before, kind of my shutdown procedure, my closing out the day. Those are the 2 times a day I'm going to check email. There are lots of opportunities to batch the little tasks and disruptions like this. And I'm not even getting into the discipline of how to do it yet, but that's really this process, right? So it's like, let's batch and put those things on the ideal week as well. You have client meetings. Maybe you can batch those a little bit. You've been doing them all over the place, just whenever people are willing to schedule. Well, you're going to just start creating some windows for yourself. And if you have a hard time with this, note that this whole thing is organic. Like, we can adjust it. You can move stuff around. That's totally acceptable. That's desirable. And we will talk about that and how we keep it organic and living as we go. So we're going to start by just saying 3 days a week. I can consolidate. If I took all my meetings, put them all together, I could easily consolidate those into 3 days, even afternoons, right? So client meetings are now Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday afternoons. Those are client meetings. And those are going to be the windows when people want to schedule with me. I schedule them during one of those windows, and later on, if we realize that that's unfeasible for a lot of our clients, we're having issues, like they're getting upset, it doesn't work for them, yada, yada, we can explore like opening up other windows and closing down some windows or whatever we need to do. Like this is an organic thing. But let's start there. We're going to start there. And so you start to see where this happens. We can get those windows down. Now we know where those meetings are going. And now we know that Tuesday afternoon, I can just get focused in on client work. I don't need to worry about some other pieces. There's a couple that I really always want to see in a perfect week that tends to get neglected the most, and these are the important. And I talked about this even like last podcast or whatnot, and I've talked about this in other episodes. This is important versus urgent, and diving into this idea of like focusing on the important. So I recommended a couple things in other episodes to have these reviews and make sure that we're focusing on the important and carving out that time. That is what the perfect week is about: is carving it out. And so make sure that this business power hour, that this time to focus on the higher level, to work on the business and not in it, is on that calendar. So I've got 1 or 2 hours, maybe it's Thursday morning, that is focusing on the business. Maybe I don't even do that at the office because it's too hard. It's more distracting there. So before I even go in, I go to a library or whatever. I've got my home office where I can somehow stay focused without kids and everything else. But whatever it is, I got to have that window on there as well, because those are things that are really we tend to neglect. We can put a lot of those important, not urgent items on the list to deal with on Thursday mornings. So that's it. I mean, that is really the nutshell of what this idea of the perfect week is. Let's map out our week. We've got all these windows to work with. We know what's happening. So, what is the point? Like, what benefits do we have? Well, first of all, we have permission to focus. And this should be communicated, by the way, with your whole team. So everybody should know kind of where you're at and how you work and your new communication protocols and whatever it might be. Like, let's just be open about this. And in fact, I recommend the whole team do this as well for themselves. They all should, for sure. But regardless, we're going to have these windows of time where we focus on different areas. We could theme days. There's lots of ways to kind of play with this depending on how your business is set up. I've seen this a lot with CEOs where it's like sales is one day, marketing is another day, customer service is another day. And then, serial entrepreneurs like Elon Musk has this where it's like, he deals with SpaceX on 2 days a week, and then he's at Tesla for 3 days a week, and somehow he has like a 10-day week. So then he's got a couple more days over here, and he just focuses for those specific days. He batches them all together, so those are his days at those companies. And so that's definitely a strategy that can be utilized here to design the perfect week. But regardless, now we have permission to focus on the tasks at hand. If things are coming into our brains and we're getting distracted, the idea now is that we can mentally note that, hey, I can deal with that tomorrow when its window comes. The window isn't right now, it's tomorrow. So I'm going to deal with it then. And that's what I'm going to do, is I'm going to focus on what are the steps that are going to be coming, and I can put that aside. Now, I still want to capture it, get it out of my head, and know that it's on a list I will look at tomorrow. So maybe it's a phone call I need to make to a client. Well, I've got tomorrow afternoon's client time, and I have a list of phone calls, and I just go through them and just batch them out. Bam, bam, bam. Now I know I've got that. I write it down. I put it away, and now it's set. Tomorrow afternoon comes. I can pull out the list and take care of it. I don't need to worry about it now. I know I don't need to worry about it now, and I can actually just rest at ease. Now, this isn't an immediate thing, but you will find that pretty quickly you start to feel that relief. Suddenly you can say, like, I'll deal with that tomorrow, because you know it will be taken care of tomorrow. When the time comes, the window hits, boom, you focus on that. You're going to dig in deep, and the other pieces have their windows of time. So that's really one of the biggest reasons for overwhelm, is we're trying to just think about our whole world all the time, all at once, versus just realizing, like, no, I only need to think about this right now, because that I can think about tomorrow. And if we've intentionally drawn it out, written it down, captured it, and it's set to go, we can rest at ease. We know it will be taken care of, and then we can move forward. That's one of the biggest benefits to this, is being able to do that. The other piece is it just keeps you going through those motions. As I mentioned, you might not finish a project in its allotted window, and you need to schedule more time for the next window, or maybe you have what we call buffer time. Like you have one afternoon a week that just is the catch-all for the projects that didn't get done or whatever. You can organize and play with this in such a way that allows you to do that. To be able to accommodate those things, and just kind of, sometimes you do kick the can a little bit, but it's in its next space, and it will be addressed when that space comes. I didn't quite get that project done now. I'll do it tomorrow when that window comes back around, and I can work on these other pieces, because we so often need to get various things moving forward at the same time. So it's impossible to do. There are certain spaces, industries, types of people that seriously can focus on one project until it's done, and sometimes it's like an entire week on a single project. I applaud those individuals, and if you are one, then you can obviously design your ideal week to accommodate that type of planning process, to where your windows are really big. They're all focused on like very particular projects, and once it's done, you just insert the next project and start working on it. great. But you still usually have time for, or are going to need time for things like email and things, other communication that you might have to deal with. And so, you're still going to have to deal with these things. You're just going to adjust your windows slightly to accommodate those differences and those changes. So that's one of the biggest pieces with this, man. Permission to work on what needs to be done. And it also allows you to focus on those, as I mentioned, when that time comes for the important, not the urgent, now you can get those things done. They're not on fire. That's a new product line you've been chewing on, whatever it is. Now you can sit down and for an hour or two that you've got carved out, really dig into it and not worry about the fires that are burning around you because their time has not yet come. You're going to deal with those after this window. And that's part of this game. I'm going to deal with it. I'm not saying no. I'm just going to deal with it in 30 minutes. And that's often all it takes. We often have this weird notion that we need to react immediately, but no one is expecting that. Granted, you might create that expectation, but even then, if the difference between immediate drop everything and let me deal with it now and I'll get to it in 30 minutes to the people you work with is probably negligible. If you just tell them when, you're good. That's most often the case. Great, yeah, I'll deal with that tomorrow afternoon. Okay, well, now I know when it's going to be taken care of. That loop is closed for me. I don't need to sit and fret anymore. I'm not sitting around worrying. If you say, let me get to it as soon as I can, I don't know when that is, and so I'm worrying about it. But if you say, I'm going to get to it tomorrow afternoon, hey, now even I can rest easier because you've closed the loop for me. So there are great advantages for the team, for everyone to be able to explore this idea of the perfect week and then try to model it. Now, the next step, actually living it. So we've got this fantastic map of our perfect week. How do we live it? This is the part that messes with a lot of people, is that they aren't able to do it, their initial plan, and so it just kind of becomes the dust collecting idea in the desk drawer. This is meant to be an organic testing, hypothetical concept, whatever you want to call it. This is an exercise where we create our hypothesis and then we test it. We're scientific here. Don't you know that, people? Come on. So with that process, we've mapped out this ideal week. Then every week during, once a week, we recommend having this weekly cleanup, this weekly roundup. That weekly cleanup process is where you kind of look and see how you did and rate yourself. Scale of 1 to 10. How did I do on my perfect week? If anyone gets a 10, I will be beyond impressed. First of all, I don't think I've ever gotten a 10. But what you'll find is that the goal is to just continually improve. And what it allows you to do is first address, yeah, I was weak. I should have said no. I chose that. I got distracted. I can kind of explore that a little bit. But I also can note where things need to change. I said I was going to go to the gym at noon every day. And guess what? I never go to the gym at noon because I always got lunch meetings. Well, I need to do those lunch meetings. They're important. So let's move the gym time. Why do we keep it there? It becomes worthless on our calendar. It's just an annoying event that we're not doing. And our whole ideal week is getting thrown out because of that thing. It's like a deadline. Once the deadline is passed, it is worthless because now you have zero idea when something is going to come around, unless you reset those deadlines. So having all this overdue stuff is absolutely terrible. Anyway, I digress. What we're getting at here is that's the same thing on your calendar. If it's not working, change it. I've done this before. I've said I want to do this, heavy research and stuff on Friday afternoons. Well, I found that Friday afternoon I'd rather bug out, or I'm kind of starting to think about personal stuff a lot more, and it's harder to focus and get deep in thought and these things. So I moved it. I moved it to another time that makes more sense for me. Maybe it's Mondays, when you're just kind of cranking up the week or whatever it might be. It's organic. Every week you can address it a little bit. You can make tweaks. You can adjust. Maybe new projects come on board, and you need to kind of reshuffle some concepts and ideas. And you can play with it, on a week-to-week basis during this kind of weekly cleanup process that you go through. So that's one of the big pieces here is during that weekly roundup, figure out what's working, what's not, what needs to go where, and let's adjust it. Let's be organic with this. And then daily, you're kind of reviewing the following day and seeing what lists you want to work from and what areas you're going to focus on in those windows, and you can kind of pre-plan what you're doing. And then when you come in the next day, you're ready to go, man. You're jamming. So the perfect week's killer. I mean, this is one of my favorite concepts when it comes to my own personal productivity. And like I said, there's definitely weeks where it's atrocious. I'm not even close to doing it, as I said, and for various reasons. And if I find out it's a systemic issue, like I said, it's never going to work. I need to make adjustments. or I need to alter my protocols and my habits, my routines a little bit more to accommodate it better. Maybe I just get distracted all the time, during a certain window. So, but I'm also just sitting at home with my kids next to me at the kitchen table. I mean, I can just alter my environment a little bit or see what I can do that way. So that's part of this game, is recognizing, like, what is the reasons that we're failing? Can we alter the environment and the situation to make it easier? Or is this a systemic problem that we probably just need to reorganize because other priorities are getting in the way? And priorities are priorities. So if something higher priority always gets in the way, we just need to move it out of its way and find its own home. So that is really what the perfect week is all about. Now, question for you all, if you are listening to this still, I would love to hear what your thoughts are on the perfect week. If you have things that have worked, things that are not working, or suggestions or ideas or comments or hate mail or whatever it might be, I want to hear it. And I'd love to kind of connect on this. So if you go to Akomplish.com, you'll see the episode. You can comment on the episode, and we can chat a little bit more about it. I'd love to see even examples of ideal weeks, and I'll even potentially post some of my own, or of this idea of the perfect week. We used to call it the ideal week. A lot of people call things like the ideal week, so I've changed it to the perfect week. Either way, I'm not saying it's some sort of trademarked fanciness. Anyone that says it's trademarked, I think, is mildly crazy, considering it's been around forever. But regardless, designing that perfect week, I want to see it. I'd love to hear from you, and from all of us here, meaning me and Akomplish.com, Billy Bush. Here I am signing off. Thanks again, and look forward to talking to you soon.
Thanks for listening to Akomplish Radio from Akomplish.com. Now, get out and accomplish something great.